What if one ordinary man could save hundreds of children and never tell anyone about it for nearly 50 years? History often remembers great leaders, famous generals, and powerful politicians. But sometimes, the greatest heroes are the ones almost no one knows. They don't wear uniforms, they don't seek recognition, and they never expect applause. This is the remarkable true story of Nicholas Winton, a young British man who quietly organized one of the most extraordinary humanitarian rescue efforts before the Second World War. Without military power, without political influence, without expecting anything in return, he helped hundreds of children escape a future filled with uncertainty, giving them the chance to grow up, build families, and live the lives they might never have had. For decades, almost no one knew what he had done. Even his own wife had no idea. This is the story of courage, compassion, and a promise that changed generations. The year was 1938. Europe was changing rapidly. Tension between nations had been growing for years, and many families feared that peace would not last much longer in Czechoslovakia, especially around Prague. Thousands of Jewish families found themselves living with increasing uncertainty. Parents worried every day about the future of their children. No one knew exactly what would happen next, but many sensed that difficult times were approaching. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in London, a 29-year-old stockbroker named Nicholas Winton was living what seemed to be an ordinary life. He worked in finance. His days were filled with paperwork, meetings, and the routine of city life. Like many young professionals, he planned to spend his winter holiday skiing in Switzerland. It was supposed to be a relaxing vacation. But one unexpected phone call changed everything. A close friend, Martin Blake, had traveled to Prague to assist humanitarian volunteers. Instead of inviting Winton to Switzerland, Blake urged him to come to Czechoslovakia instead. "There is something here you need to see." Nicholas had no idea that accepting this invitation would completely change the course of his life. When Nicholas arrived in Prague in December 1938, the city looked peaceful on the surface. People still walked through the streets. Markets remained open. Children still played in public squares. But beneath that ordinary appearance was a growing atmosphere of fear. Thousands of families had already been displaced from nearby regions. Temporary refugee camps had begun to fill with parents and children carrying only a few belongings. Some families had left their homes with little more than a suitcase. Others had become separated from relatives during their journey. Many had no clear idea where they would go next. Nicholas spent several days visiting these camps. He spoke with volunteers. He listened to parents. He watched children trying to smile despite the uncertainty surrounding them. What affected him most was not the lack of food or shelter. It was the expressions on the faces of the parents. They were not asking someone to save them. They were asking if someone could save their children. Again and again, Nicholas heard the same heartbreaking question. Is there any country that will take my son? Can someone protect my daughter? Will my child have a future? He had no answers, not yet. One afternoon, Nicholas met a young mother holding her little daughter close. The child quietly played with a small cloth doll. The mother gently smiled at Nicholas. Then she asked a question he would never forget. If only one of us could leave, would you choose my daughter? Nicholas was speechless. No parent should ever have to ask such a question. No mother should have to imagine saying goodbye to her child without knowing if they would ever meet again. That moment stayed with him. he realized something important. Governments were discussing politics. Leaders were negotiating agreements. But children could not wait. Every passing day made the situation more uncertain. Someone needed to act, even if that someone was just one ordinary man. That moment stayed with him. He realized something important. Governments were discussing politics. Leaders were negotiating agreements. But children could not wait. Every passing day made the situation more uncertain. Someone needed to act, even if that someone was just one ordinary man. Then perhaps many young lives could be protected. It sounded almost impossible. Yet impossible ideas often begin with ordinary people refusing to give up. Nicholas rented a small room in Prague. The room quickly became a temporary office, a simple desk, several chairs, stacks of paper, a typewriter. Nothing about the room suggested it would become the center of a rescue effort remembered for generations. Word spread quickly among refugee families. Parents began arriving one after another. Some carried photographs of their children. Others brought birth certificates. Many simply carried hope. Nicholas carefully wrote down every child's name, every age, every family detail. He knew each piece of information might one day help reunite families. The list grew longer every day. Dozens became hundreds. Hundreds continued to grow. Soon, Nicholas understood the scale of the challenge before him. This was far bigger than he had imagined. But turning back was no longer an option. Because once you have looked into the eyes of parents desperate to protect their children, you cannot simply walk away. When Nicholas Winton returned to London in early 1939, his journey had come to an end. But his mission had only just begun. He carried more than luggage. He carried lists of children's names, family information, handwritten notes, and photographs given to him by parents who had placed their trust in a man they had known for only a few days. Back in England, life continued as usual. People hurried to work. Trains arrived on schedule. Shops were busy. Most people had little idea of what thousands of families in Central Europe were facing. Nicholas, however, could not forget what he had seen. Every evening after finishing his regular job, he sat at his dining room table and continued working late into the night. The table slowly disappeared beneath stacks of documents, letters, application forms, photographs, maps, lists of names. Without realizing it, his home had become the headquarters of an extraordinary rescue effort. Saving children required much more than good intentions. Each child needed permission to leave. Each child needed travel documents. Each child needed a family willing to provide a temporary home in Britain. British authorities also required a financial guarantee for every child to ensure they would be supported after arrival. It was a complicated process. Every missing signature meant another delay. Every delayed document meant another family waiting in uncertainty. Time was becoming the greatest challenge. Nicholas understood that every day mattered. Instead of feeling discouraged, he focused on solving one problem at a time. One of the biggest obstacles was finding people willing to welcome children they had never met. Nicholas wrote letters to churches, community groups, charities, and ordinary families across Britain. He explained the situation simply and honestly. Children needed safety. They needed temporary homes. Most importantly, they needed people willing to open their hearts. At first, responses arrived slowly. Some families hesitated. Others worried they would not be able to provide enough support. But many people chose compassion over fear. Letters of acceptance began arriving. "We can welcome one child. We have room for two. Our family would be happy to help." Each letter represented more than a place to stay. It represented hope. Nicholas carefully matched children with families, making sure every detail was recorded. He knew that every decision carried enormous responsibility. Back in Prague, parents continued waiting for news. Whenever word arrived that a child had been accepted into Britain, families experienced two very different emotions at the same time: relief and heartbreak. Sending a child away meant safety, but it also meant separation. Many parents had no idea whether they would ever see their sons or daughters again. Still, they made the difficult decision, not because they wanted to say goodbye, but because they wanted their children to have a future. Some mothers carefully packed small suitcases, a favorite sweater, a family photograph, a handwritten note, a tiny toy. Simple reminders of home. Many fathers tried to remain strong. They smiled. They encouraged their children to be brave. Only after the train disappeared into the distance did many allow their emotions to show. Finally, the first rescue train was ready to depart. Children gathered at Prague's railway station, wearing identification tags around their necks. Each tag carried important information that would help volunteers identify them upon arrival in Britain. The station was filled with mixed emotions. Volunteers checked documents one last time. Parents held their children tightly. Some whispered words of encouragement. Others simply smiled, hoping their children would remember that smile for years to come. As the train slowly began moving, children waved from the windows. Parents waved back. No one knew whether this would be a temporary farewell or a final goodbye. For many families, it was an act of extraordinary courage. Nicholas was not standing in the spotlight. He remained focused on one question: how could the next train be organized? The success of the first journey proved that the plan could work. Nicholas immediately turned his attention to the next group of children, then the next, and the next. Every completed journey encouraged more volunteers to join the effort. People donated time, others donated money, some helped organize paperwork, others welcomed children into their homes. What had started as one man's determination slowly became a network of ordinary people working together for a shared purpose. No one sought fame. Everyone focused on the children. Week after week, trains continued leaving Prague. Each departure carried another group of young passengers toward safety. Each successful arrival brought relief to volunteers waiting in London. Children stepped onto British platforms carrying small suitcases and uncertain futures. Many could not speak. Many had never traveled so far from home. Everything around them felt unfamiliar. Yet waiting for them were families ready to offer kindness, patience, and a place to belong. For the first time in many months, many of these children could sleep without wondering what tomorrow might bring. By the summer of 1939, 8 rescue trains had successfully reached Britain. Together, they carried 669 children to safety. It was an extraordinary achievement. Yet, Nicholas was already preparing another transport. More children remained on the waiting list. More parents hoped their sons and daughters would have the same opportunity. A 9th train was scheduled. Hundreds more children had received permission to travel. Their bags were packed. Their documents were ready. Families held onto one last hope. No one could imagine how quickly history was about to change. On September 1, 1939, everything changed. Germany invaded Poland, and the Second World War began. Borders closed almost immediately. The 9th rescue train, carrying around 250 children, was scheduled to leave Prague that very day. But it never departed. The children waited. Their parents waited. The platform grew quiet. The journey that was meant to bring hope was canceled before it could begin. For Nicholas Winton, it was heartbreaking. He had done everything he could, but some events were beyond anyone's control. Although the final train never left, the previous 8 trains had already brought 669 children to safety. Each one represented a life given another chance. After the war, Nicholas returned to his everyday life. He never described himself as a hero. He rarely spoke about the rescue mission. In fact, even many of his closest friends and family had no idea what he had accomplished. For nearly 5 decades, the story remained hidden. Then, in 1988, everything changed. While organizing old belongings at home, his wife discovered a scrapbook filled with photographs, letters, and lists of the children Nicholas had helped rescue. It was the first time many people learned about his extraordinary work. Soon after, Nicholas was invited to appear on a television program. He believed he was simply there to discuss history. What he didn't know was that many of the people sitting around him were the very children he had rescued nearly 50 years earlier. The host asked a simple question. Is anyone here alive today because of Nicholas Winton? One person stood, then another, and another. Within moments, people throughout the audience rose to their feet. Nicholas looked around in complete surprise. Many of those children were now parents and grandparents. Some were teachers. Some were doctors. Some had built families of their own. The lives he had helped save had grown into thousands of descendants across generations. For the first time, he truly saw the impact of one decision made decades earlier. Nicholas Winton never asked to be remembered. He never sought recognition or reward. He simply believed that when someone has the chance to help, they should. His quiet act of compassion changed hundreds of lives and inspired countless others around the world. His story reminds us that true courage is not always loud. Sometimes, it begins with one person choosing kindness when it matters most. If this story inspired you, take a moment to share it with someone who believes that one person can make a difference. And if you enjoy true stories of courage, hope, and humanity, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next documentary. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.